Welcome to the debate. Imagine just sitting at an empty desk.
Okay, painting a picture here.
Right, so no heavy lifting, no complex machinery to operate, just you and a task. So why does focusing on that task for 30 minutes feel like you've just run a literal physical marathon?
Oh, I mean, it really is the ultimate invisible heavy lifting.
Exactly.
And, the most dangerous part of this resistance isn't the cognitive fatigue itself. It's the fact that you often don't even realize you've dropped the weight until, bam, 30 minutes have just completely vanished into thin air.
Yeah, you think you're working, and suddenly you are miles away.
Right.
And that exact invisible struggle brings us to the material we're examining today. We're looking at the underlying mechanics of how human beings actually cultivate concentration.
Which is fascinating because the text establishes a really clear baseline right out of the gate.
It does. It says focus is not some innate magical talent. You're not just gifted with it at birth or permanently lacking it. It is absolutely a developable skill.
Right, it's a habit. It's built and reinforced through practice. But, and here's the catch, that is precisely where the agreement in the text ends.
Yeah, and where the true complexity begins.
Exactly. Because if focus is a developable skill, the immediate question is, well, what's the actual mechanism for developing it?
And that is the central disagreement we are exploring today. Is concentration primarily built through internal cognitive and, physiological training?
Or is it fundamentally a product of external environmental architecture?
Right. Like, are we supposed to be training the internal stamina of the brain itself? Or are we simply required to build a completely sterile, perfectly engineered room around the brain so it doesn't get derailed?
Are we fortifying the fortress from the inside or just removing all the enemies from the battlefield?
I mean, I look at the evidence in the text, and to me, it's undeniable that focus is fundamentally an internal capacity. It's an inside job.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's built through structured cognitive habits, biological maintenance, and deliberate internal pacing.
Well, I come at it from a different way.
Let's hear it.
Because you can have the most perfectly regulated, well-rested brain in the world, pacing itself flawlessly, and all of that internal cognitive training is entirely neutralized by environmental friction.
You think the environment just overwrites it?
Oh, absolutely. Focus is inherently dependent on external environmental control. Even the absolute strongest internal discipline completely fails if you don't manage your physical surroundings.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. If we look at the actual mechanisms the material presents, the internal perspective emerges really clearly.
How so?
Well, the text explicitly tells us that to build focus, we have to start small. We're instructed to use these 20-minute focused intervals, followed by a 5-minute break.
To stretch, hydrate, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Move around. And this isn't just generic scheduling advice, It's tapping into the brain's baseline neurobiology. You don't just sit down and demand 3 hours of unbroken concentration.
Right. You build the cognitive muscle through internal pacing. The material notes that this satisfies the, quote, brain's preference for small goals.
But
Wait, furthermore, it makes this foundational biological assertion. A tired brain cannot focus well. Everything rests on internal physiology. Focus fails not because of the room you happen to be sitting in, but because the internal engine is poorly paced or completely out of fuel.
okay, but let's actually test that internal engine against the real world.
Fair enough.
The material provides a highly specific, very vivid cautionary tale here. David's bad study day.
Ah, yes. David.
Right. Here is someone with perfect intentions. David sat at his desk, opened his book, fully intending to study for a solid block of time.
His internal state was committed.
Entirely committed. His engine, theoretically, was fueled and ready. But what actually happened? A single phone buzz.
Just one.
One message, then another, then a social media app, and suddenly 30 minutes disappeared to what the text literally calls bad magic.
Which is exactly why the internal framework is so critical.
But wait, let's compare David's failure to Emma's success in that same material. Emma didn't magically improve her internal stamina through sheer willpower, right?
Well, she made a change.
She made one purely environmental change. She physically removed her phone to another room and entirely eliminated the notifications, and over a month, her understanding vastly improved.
I mean, sure, that helped.
She didn't just remove a piece of plastic, though. She eliminated the cost of resistance. When a phone is just sitting on a desk, even if you don't actively touch it, your brain is burning active glucose just to suppress the urge to grab it.
It's a drain on working memory.
Exactly. By moving it to another room, she freed up that cognitive bandwidth. Creating that sterile environment is the actual driver of focus, rather than internal stamina.
Okay, I hear you, but let's drill deeply into David's bad study day for a second, because I think it actually highlights the exact lack of an internal framework that I'm talking about.
Really?
Yes, David failed precisely because he lacked cognitive pacing. Think of focus like long-distance running.
Okay, I'm with you.
If you just step onto a track and say, I'm going to run until I'm exhausted, you're going to burn out quickly. Your pacing is completely chaotic.
Sure.
But if you have an internal pacing strategy, run for 20 minutes, walk for 5, that internal rhythm is what gets you to the finish line, regardless of whether it's sunny or raining outside.
I'm not sure the weather analogy holds up to a phone buzz.
But David didn't have that internal pacing. He just sat down with a vague, unstructured goal to study. The material explains that the underlying mechanism of the 20-minute chunk is that it gives the brain a discrete, manageable objective.
But
When you apply that internal constraint, your brain is actively locked into a high engagement state. That internal boundary protects you from distraction because your resources are fully deployed toward a short-term finish line.
I have to push back on that timeline, though, because the mechanics of distraction do not operate on a 20-minute schedule.
What do you mean?
But David lost his focus within seconds of his phone buzzing. He didn't fail at minute 19 of a 20-minute goal. Because his internal pacing degraded, he failed the exact moment the environment interrupted him.
But if the brain is actively engaged,
We are talking about bottom-up processing here. External triggers completely bypass cognitive pacing. If the phone is sitting on the desk and it buzzes, the 20-minute goal is completely useless.
I wouldn't say useless.
It is. The external stimulus, like a sudden sound or a flash of light, hijacks the brain's attention system before your top-down pacing even has a chance to intervene. It's an evolutionary reflex. You cannot outpace a notification that instantly demands your attention.
I think you're underestimating top-down control.
Yeah, I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning.
Why not?
Because you're treating the human brain as this purely reactive mechanism, like it has no top-down internal control whatsoever. Yes, the external trigger is fast. It's a bottom-up stimulus. But the internal framework, saying to yourself, I am focusing on this one specific lesson for 20 minutes, preloads the brain's intention.
Preloads it.
Exactly. It creates a top-down cognitive barrier. You're actually raising the threshold for what can distract you. And the material backs this up by emphasizing how small victories build confidence. Great, but
When you complete that 20 minutes and tell yourself, I did it, you are actively building internal neurological resilience against those exact triggers. It is a trainable muscle.
okay, but let's look closely at how the material describes the environment's effect on that supposed top-down control.
All right.
Because it isn't just about active buzzing interruptions like a phone. It's about passive environmental friction, which drains your control without you even realizing it. The text specifically highlights the danger of a messy desk.
Oh, the snack museum?
Yes, it brilliantly calls it a snack museum full of books, pens, cookies, and coffee cups.
It's a great visual, I'll give you that.
It is, and the material explicitly states that a messy desk makes the brain feel busy. Let's think about the actual cognitive mechanism at play there. Think of your visual field as like an open microphone.
An open microphone. Okay.
Yeah. When your desk is a snack museum, that microphone is picking up constant low-level static. Your brain has to actively work to mute that static. Every single object in your peripheral vision is an environmental affordance.
Meaning it suggests an action.
Exactly. A cookie affords eating. A pen affords clicking. Your brain is subconsciously processing all of those potential actions. Your internal stamina is at the absolute mercy of this external visual information.
But
If the environment is cluttered, the brain feels cluttered.
because its working memory is being drained just trying to filter out the noise. You simply cannot impose a clean, internal 20-minute framework on a brain that's being actively fragmented by a snack museum.
That is a fascinating interpretation of the snack museum concept. And I agree that cognitive load is a real factor.
Thank you.
But you're completely ignoring a massive piece of the source materials puzzle regarding how we handle our environment.
Which is?
If the physical environment is so overwhelmingly powerful that it dictates the brain's state, if the open microphone of visual static always wins, how do you explain the material's recommendation to talk to yourself?
Wait, what does talking to yourself have to do with visual clutter?
Everything. The text advises narrating your daily activities to build focus. It suggests saying out loud things like, I'm making tea, I'm washing the dishes, or I'm opening the window.
Right.
These are mundane chores, right? Often happening in potentially messy, visually cluttered environments like a kitchen. Yet, the material explicitly states that this active linguistic engagement keeps your brain active.
Okay, but
Think about the neurological implication of that. If the environment truly dictates the brain's state, narrating the act of making tea in a messy kitchen shouldn't work. The visual static should overwhelm you. But it doesn't.
well, yeah, because it's a physical task.
No, because this proves that active internal linguistic engagement, top-down processing, literally overrides a distracting or messy environment. You don't need to completely sterilize the kitchen to stay focused on making tea.
I mean,
You use internal linguistic scaffolding. Talking to yourself anchors your attention. By narrating your actions, you're forcing the brain's language centers to direct your focus, effectively muting that visual microphone you mentioned. The internal action commands the brain's state, not the cups scattered on the counter. Focus is an internal override code.
okay, it's a very clever connection to make, pointing out the linguistic scaffolding, though I would frame it differently.
Naturally.
Narrating washing the dishes or making tea works specifically because those are physical interactions with the environment. You're verbally aligning your internal monologue with your external surroundings. They're operating in tandem.
Okay.
But when you're sitting at a desk trying to study abstract concepts or write an essay, a snack museum provides aggressively conflicting visual data. You aren't interacting with the cookies and coffee cups, you are trying to ignore them while focusing on an abstract thought.
But the internal override.
The self-talk might keep the brain active while doing physical chores, where the environment is the task. But if your study environment is a visual disaster, the brain is processing that clutter in direct opposition to the abstract work. The cognitive load gets way too high, and your internal override code eventually crashes.
Which brings us precisely to what actually allows the brain to handle any cognitive load at all, whether it's filtering out a snack museum or focusing on a complex text. Physiological balance.
Ah, biology.
Yes, this is where the internal argument becomes truly undeniable. The material lays this out as an absolute prerequisite for focus. You have to sleep well, drink water, eat healthy food, move the body.
I mean, I don't think anyone is arguing that sleep isn't important.
Look, everyone listening knows they need sleep. We aren't here to preach basic hygiene, but the material makes this point because of the crucial neurobiological reality beneath it. Why does a tired brain fail to focus?
Because it's tired.
Because when you are sleep-deprived or dehydrated, your prefrontal cortex, the exact part of the brain responsible for that top-down executive function, is the first thing to go offline. You literally lose the hardware required to ignore the phone on your desk.
Sure, but
You can put a sleep-deprived, dehydrated person in a perfectly sterile, quiet room, no phone, perfectly silenced notifications, immaculately clean desk, and they will still stare blankly at the wall. Their focus will still fail.
obviously baseline biology matters.
The ultimate foundation of progress isn't physical isolation. It's the physiological capacity to sustain attention. The internal biology is the absolute, non-negotiable prerequisite for any concentration whatsoever.
That is a compelling argument, but have you considered that even a perfectly hydrated, exquisitely well-rested person with a fully functioning prefrontal cortex cannot focus in a highly chaotic environment?
Well, they can if they train it.
Yes, baseline biology is a prerequisite, just like having an engine is a prerequisite for driving a car.
but it's not the primary mechanism of execution in the real world. And the material gives us a highly specific example of this when it discusses navigating social and environmental pressures.
You're referring to the classroom example.
Exactly. The text asks us to imagine being in class. The teacher's at the front, explaining something important, but your friend sitting next to you wants to talk.
Right, a classic distraction.
They are actively seeking your attention. So what's the rule the material gives to handle this? It doesn't say, drink more water to boost your prefrontal cortex, or rely on your good night's sleep to power through.
No, it says to smile.
It says, smile and listen to the teacher. You have to navigate that external pressure. Finishing one task before starting another, which the text defines as working like a professional, is fundamentally an exercise in environmental boundary setting.
I disagree with that framing.
It's about blocking out the friend, sitting somewhere quiet, and engineering the space so you can actually do the work. Navigating those external pressures is the true test of focus, not just drinking a glass of water and hoping your hardware does the rest.
But let's look at the actual mechanics of how you say no to that friend in the classroom, because I think it proves my point perfectly.
How so?
You say no by making a deliberate cognitive choice to prioritize the teacher. The material explicitly says good focus means making good choices. That choice happens entirely internally.
But the trigger is external.
But in that classroom scenario, you don't physically remove your friend from the room the way Emma removed her phone. You don't build a soundproof wall between your desks. The environment remains highly distracting.
True.
Yet, you use your internal regulation to smile, defer the conversation, and intentionally direct your attention back to the lesson. You are actively choosing one thing over another in the face of friction. That is internal stamina in action. It's the exact opposite of relying on the environment to be quiet.
Yet the most successful, most highly praised interventions in the text, Emma hiding her phone for a month, clearing the messy desk, sitting somewhere completely quiet, they do not rely on making a hard cognitive choice in the moment.
Well,
They rely on engineering the environment beforehand so you don't have to make the choice at all. This is about decision fatigue, you know?
sure, decision fatigue is real.
Every time you have to use internal stamina to ignore a distraction, you burn a little bit of that willpower. Emma didn't use internal regulation to stare at her phone and repeatedly choose not to touch it. She removed the phone entirely, so the choice was eliminated. The choices that matter most are made prior to the work by shaping the physical surroundings.
So we arrive at a very clear substantive division in how we interpret the mechanics of concentration here.
We definitely do.
From my perspective, analyzing the biological and cognitive evidence in the material, focus is fundamentally an internal rhythm. It's built through those 20-minute intervals that satisfy the brain's preference for small, manageable goals.
Right.
It's anchored by internal techniques like linguistic scaffolding, talking to yourself to keep the brain active, and it is absolutely sustained by physiological care. Focus is an internal engine, and if you maintain and pace that engine, you can drive through any weather.
And from my perspective, analyzing the exact same material, focus is overwhelmingly an environmental state. It is achieved by physically hiding phones in other rooms to eliminate the cost of resistance.
The external architecture.
Exactly. Silencing notifications before you even sit down, and clearing away the messy desks and snack museums that actively drain your working memory with visual static. It's the physical space that dictates success or failure because you just can't out-willpower a chaotic environment.
Well, despite this sharp disagreement on the primary mechanism, internal stamina versus external architecture, we do find significant convergence in the source material. We both clearly agree on the core thesis. Focus is not a magic talent.
Absolutely not.
It's a practical, developable habit built through deliberate choices.
Yes. And we absolutely agree on the fundamental necessity of starting small, which the text emphasizes repeatedly.
Yeah, start small.
Whether that means setting a timer for only 20 minutes to build cognitive pacing, as you argue, or making one small physical change like moving a phone to another room, as Emma did. The mechanism of improvement is always incremental.
Because progress is more important than perfection.
Exactly.
understanding the materials rule that progress is far more important than perfection. There's clearly much more to explore in this material regarding how we navigate our daily tasks and train our minds. Listeners will have to weigh the evidence and decide for themselves where their own focus journey needs to begin.
For sure.
If you're struggling to concentrate right now, you have to ask yourself, do you need to train your brain's internal stamina first, pacing yourself and fixing your baseline biology? Or do you need to clean up your snack museum of a desk and fix your environment first?
Exactly. We invite you to consider how both your internal habits and your external environments are actively shaping your daily life. It's highly likely that small victories in either domain might, build your confidence and change how you work.
When we started this discussion, we talked about the invisible weights of focus and whether concentrating is like flexing a muscle or just trying to lift something in the middle of a storm.
A very heavy storm. Perhaps the reality requires us to ask ourselves a single, lingering question. Are we failing to lift the weight because we haven't built the internal strength, or simply because we haven't bothered to step out of the hurricane?